Today, I will just touch base few things. What we experienced, where we are today, and where we're supposed to be. As Ruchir was also mentioning that, okay, when we look at the current scenarios, definitely change is always there in the procurement, right? And we are changing all across. So when we look at the procurement phase, since identifying the source till developing them and making them as a partner, it's not the supplier or customer relationship, but it is now partnership building. So that's coming into the play nowadays. But along with the partnership building, how we can ensure that it is not going to impact our Mother Earth. So I think that's another step forward which we want to work upon. Now when we look at the sustainable procurement, what are the things we're supposed to do, right? ESG is always, we say, environment, then social and governance. When you say environment, I understood when I was working almost 12 years back, that time we were talking about ISO 14001, 18001, and these are the things aspects which coming in, because those were forcefully implied on us to work upon how we can minimize the natural resources, how we can emphasize our processes or improve our processes so that the outcome will be within the optimal resources. I think these were forced, but now it becomes the habit of each and every manufacturing setup where how we can minimize these, right? But it touched us about only environment. We were talking about, okay, how we can minimize the CO2 emissions, which is a part of now scope 3 when it comes to our sustainable reporting standpoint, right? But when we see the other two parameters like social and governance, I think we are not emphasizing more on that part. But now when we look at the requirement standpoint, we can see these are the informations are readily available if you Google it, we can able to get it. But are we really emphasizing when we do our procurement activity? Are we really taking into consideration while selecting or choosing the supplier or partner with us? I think these are the questions definitely we need to imbibe when we are doing the assessment, when we are selecting the suppliers. And these are the things probably which becomes the bottleneck. In the upcoming slides, I will touch base. What are the challenges which we could foresee and how we can overcome that? But when you say the environmental standpoint, probably we'll touch base the power usage. During our networking, most of the people are talking about, okay, how they are working towards the environment standpoint, right? Waste reduction is coming, climate change strategy when it comes to the procurement standpoint or the process standpoint. Now the next piece is the social. When we look at the social, the labor laws, how are we really complying to that? Does anybody work with GE here in this forum? Does anybody work with GE, General Electric? If someone, okay, then as a partner, when in GE, as a partner, they always go with SRG assessment as a first criteria. So SRG is nothing but social responsibility guidelines which has been defined. What GE follows, because I'm openly saying about GE because this is very well available across, okay? And this is a really good system which touches base where the supplier is following all the local laws or not. And where it comes and when we did the assessment, almost most of the suppliers are not complying to that. Then we put the emphasis on that, okay, how they can follow these guidelines, and that comes as a social. And probably I just urge all of you here in the room, Probably please relook into that, your questionnaires. Probably social question needs to be addressed. We need to do our introspective ourselves as well in our own plant. Are we really following them? Are we really giving a justice to the contract laborers? Because mainly the people those are working with us, definitely we do take care of them. But along with that, the contract laborers also, we need to be ensured that the similar facilities or similar rules shall be compliant with them as well. So that's the main requirement which I definitely, why I'm emphasizing it, because I have seen, because we used to do close to 300 plus assessments every year in India. And we used to find at least 70% suppliers defaulted in that case. And when we do the assessment, we used to push them to change the system, and definitely they used to do it. But it's only a 300, but we have a large industry which we have in India. Probably we need to emphasize it more on that piece. Next is the governance. Governance, here it touches base about the compliance piece, anti-bribery processes which we have, because these are the two things which are mainly relevant in this forum right now. So that is also another area, but we are not emphasizing more. But if you look at globally, you can find so many news which are coming up about the anti-bribery cases, where the companies were getting penalized with millions of dollars of penalties because of the bribery situations. There are few cases has happened in India as well, but I will not quote these names because you can Google it, you can find them. But when it comes to the leadership, and we always emphasize that, okay, the leaders is always walk the talk, right? Whatever they say, it should be delivered or show the path to the others. So similar thing which will come to the governance piece. Now, what are the key enablers for the ESG standpoint, right? When we see the reporting, ESG reporting, there are so many tools, so many guidelines, so many frameworks available. Now, which one we should follow? That's the biggest question mark. When it comes to the, it's distributed with the region also, or continental as well. Europeans having some set of different requirements. American side, we can go on NAFTA region, it is different. In Asia Pacific, their expectations are different. So probably we need to see, and there is a opportunity for us to simplify it, because probably we need to give that inputs to the agencies, and probably we need to, feedback mechanism needs to bring in there. Now coming to the responsibility matrix. Now, as we sitting here as a procurement, we always get something from the, and as we look at the cost out is the only criteria all across in every industry. But as Ruchir mentioned, how we can make it cost out but benefiting both the parties. I think that balance which we need to maintain, keeping the Mother Earth intact or society intact. So probably here, when we look at the product, manufacturer, dealer, distributor, I think these are the chains which we can see. As I work with VESUVIUS, there are almost 30% of the products which we buy from the traders. And as specialty chemicals buying, then the manufacturer may be somewhere else. Now, whether the ESG requirements are really applicable for the trader? When we ask this question, then definitely the answer is yes. But when we put the questionnaire to them, they simply reject because the manufacturing process is not defined there, because that's not in their scope. Their human rights and everything is not already defined. Using the renewable power, because their consumption is very limited. COC emissions is not in their area. However, now we are emphasizing to go with tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, up to that level. Because as you are a trader, that's fine, but I need the data. We need the data from the tier 2, tier 3 level so that we can ensure that these people also following the ESG practices at their end, right? That's the responsibility matrix probably we need to strengthening is needed across. Then when we see the ESG, then it comes to setting up different systems across in the processes for the monitoring. Then what is the benefit at the end? Every organization, when we put up the proposal on the table to the leadership, the simple question they ask, what is the IR, right? And what is how long it will be, right? Probably when we look at the ESG, probably we need to skip that question. And we look at how our processes become more sustainable. I think probably we need to put that as a benchmark there, and then probably we need to emphasize to implement that changes in the processes. That's the key point which I just want to talk about, the impacting of the ESG initiatives in the organization, right? As we can see, the artificial intelligence and human intelligence, and when it comes to the human intelligence, the data management, it becomes more important piece. We have a data which is scattered, but when we compile together, probably artificial intelligence is needed to bring it together and utilize it effectively by human intelligence. That's the important piece. But when you look at the ESG standpoint, in the reporting, when we go the reporting, we always look for the environmental data, how we can produce the governance data when we look for the EcoVadis assessment or the CDP assessments, because these are the agencies who give the scorecard for your company. And in that case, definitely how we can provide the inputs to them, that is definitely a clumsy at this moment. There are a lot of assumptions are coming in picture when we are calculating the CO2 emission. Every country specific power generation and other factors are coming into picture, and on that basis it is getting calculated. Now when we look at the G20 slogan, right, one earth, one family, one future, I think that is important piece. Now when we look at the ESG as a whole, when ISO 9001 2015 now, but when ISO has introduced, the automotive three big player came together and they defined the process, like US 9000, and then it becomes the ISO. And similar perspective probably we need to bring into the sustainability or ESG as well, so that it will become the unanimously a single guideline and which will be followed across the globe, right? So this is the strategy framework for VESUVIUS. I just put it on the board, but it touched base about the people at the first. Then we look at the product and the principles. When we look at where is the environment here, right? But environment is the by default. Whenever we do our processes, we always ensure that environment is always the first piece there. Now, when we look at the benefits to the organization, we can see the studies across going on. KPMG does that, or other players who does these studies, and we can find a couple of good benefits by the organizations are getting through that. One is definitely when we go with the customer base, then customer base increase. We can see last data in the KPMG has been published, 12% increase into the customer base, because as we can see in the room, a couple of people are looking at, ESG as the primary or we can say the first step to select the supplier, right? When we go with that. So I think that definitely improves our footprint. When we reduce your resources, definitely it is reducing your product cost or operation cost. When we look at the governance piece, then definitely you will be very peaceful in terms of the non-compliance ways, where there will be legal notices and everything. So that is another way of looking at it. Productivity of fleet, as well as when we look at the investments will be sustainable. So that means we put the extra today, but it will be long lasting. I think these are the aspects which we can see from the benefit standpoint. So that's the piece which we'd like to put across about the ESG standpoint. Any questions, comments?
My question is very conflict. One is one side is the ROI and payback. One side is the reputation. Third is the maturity index. And most important things, how to be you convince your supplier to supplier. You can convince the tier 1 supplier. But when you don't know who is the tier 2 supplier or tier 1 supplier and you are sitting at here. So is it not seen when your, suppose like in your ERP system, every enterprises things are connected. Still in the world, other than in even India is a very beginners in the ESG. So how it is a chain of the sequence, then the all concept, because your cost is always be increased in terms of when you go for a major compliance. And when you costing your finance team, like Mr. Ruchir say, your finance asks, is it finance taken a consideration of the ESG parameters compliance? Never. And when you talk about any vendor, he charge 5%. Can you allow him to give a 5% premium? So my question is that how to be your ROI and your compliance both can be integrated until unless you don't have a maturity index.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is valid point. And today, if you look at how many suppliers are really appearing for the assessments, very few. When you see the live example, last year we asked almost 720 suppliers to go for the assessment, ESG assessment, and we could achieve only 223. So remaining suppliers declined. Okay, out of that, if you look at bifurcate, how many are manufacturers, how many are dealers, then definitely that number will be lesser in terms of the manufacturing standpoint. But now, henceforth, and that's the reason I put that point forward, we need to go with the tier 2, tier 3 level, and we need to emphasize that. And this is not going to, this is a journey. We are just initiated, and it will take few years for sure to bring it to maturity level. But now we need to take that as an initiative during the selection process, supply selection process, as rightly mentioned. Right?
I have a question here. Thank you. When we talk about ESG, I mean, theoretically we are in saying that we have to go on this path. The criterias, I mean, still are something very vague, at least to me. In case somebody has a question, answer to that question, I am very happy to have that. What are the acceptable limits? Whether the supplier, if it is 20% compliant, 30%, whether he's in the system or out the system. When you say he's need to be part of the assessment process as well, then I think we have a big question mark whether if it is non-compliant, are we going to say no to buying or still going with the risk? So those criterias or inputs, in case you can throw some light over that, will be great.
Okay. So I'll just touch base the first block, complex regulations. It's the question itself having the answer here, the requirements as of today, and today's scenario, we are not emphasizing that, okay, how much score as a rejected criteria is not there today. We are just looking at, okay, whether how much the supplier is transparent enough to share their practices, the best practices. When we look at and the transparency is important, and that will build the trust. Okay, so today's scenario, no criteria for the rejection. That's first. Second, the requirements. When you look at the ESG, as the regulations are varying, the requirements are varying. So who takes that criteria? Like if you look at the GRI, Global Reporting Index, that is the one methodology. If they choose, then they go with that questionnaire. Similarly, other parameters, CDP, which is mainly focusing on the carbon emissions, right? So as of today, we are distinguished with respect to the regulations. No criteria to rejection to the supplier. Only we are emphasizing and I would say, giving the know-how transfer to them that not today, but tomorrow, there is a possibility that regulations become mandatory. So start understanding them and start evolving or improving their own processes. That's only a first step today, I would say.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. Myself, Ambalika. I have been in sustainability space for a decade now, and it was a good starter. I work for a climate tech company, which we work with procurement solutions and procurement departments. I have a comment and a question. Two questions were made before me, one about which framework and what is an acceptable level. Of course, you cannot afford to lose a supplier over just not them fitting into your ESG framework.
Right.
So that is where what Ms. Mohanty spoke about, stakeholder engagement and supplier engagement, that needs to come into play. So the scope of work of procurement engages beyond just finding an ideal supplier and getting in business with them, to also engaging with them for that knowledge transfer that Prasad mentioned, and how do you increase their skills over a period of time, you make them compliant, and that is basically de-risking your supply chain. And the earlier question was about maturity index and other things, but that is how you start. It's a journey. And you, Prasad, mentioned there were 300 plus target, but 200 something achieved. Why do you think other suppliers thought it's okay to decline? I have a question. Why do you think supplier thought it's okay to decline? That's my question one. And question two is that I think it will benefit the crowd, the procurement professionals here at large, to understand why would even procurement bother about responsible sourcing? And let's bring strategy into it. Like, I am anyways working with 500 vendors and one category, and I'm negotiating lead time and delivery and pricing at any given point in time. But now, why do I really have to bother about my supplier's performance? So as a procurement head, how would you kind of help everybody understand why procurement now all of a sudden has to be in the ESG and sustainability space responsible for it? And then why do you think your rest of the suppliers were okay declining?
Right. Okay, first, as I mentioned, that responsibility matrix. So most of the time, the traders or dealers say, it's not my responsibility because I'm just transactioning, right? Transactional mediator in between. So that's the reason they are running away. But as you rightly mentioned, out of that 300 suppliers, those are almost 50% are the traders. So, and that's the reason now this year onwards, we are emphasizing to go up to tier 2, tier 3 level. Okay, that's the first question, answer to the first question. Second, in the same question, second point is about the supplier base. Okay, some suppliers may be based out of China or some other region, and they say we don't have know-how about the sustainability means or ESG means, and they don't have a person who will answer these questions. Then simply say, okay, we don't know anything, simply reject it. So know-how transfer is most important thing, and as you mentioned, you are doing that. I think that's up to you, because that is needed to do that.
I'll just add to that. You showed your company framework, right? And I see you have a net zero target.
Yeah.
So now the thing is, procurement guys don't get into the board meetings when companies get these targets. They make these public commitments. They say, I'm going to be net zero by 2050, 2070. But what is net zero? You can manage your scope 1, which is the fuel and other bits that you buy, and you can manage your scope 2, which is the electricity that you buy. But scope 3 is 80% of your upstream and downstream, and wo to procurement wale ka hi kaam hai. So it eventually lands into procurement departments, KPIs and KRAs. So they're the knowledge build, the support staff, for them to work into this, to have tools that really kind of, help this transformation to happen comes in. So that is why, whether you like it or not, as long as your company has gone ahead and made a commitment, we'll be net zero, we'll be plastic or zero plastic or whatever. Carbon neutral is no more flavor of the season. Europe has cancelled it. So it is only going to snowball more for the procurement guys here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello. Hi.
This would be the last question.
Hi, this is Sanjeev So I saw one slide which you said, can you just show that ESG, the cost will be less with the
Okay. So benefits.
strong ESG, weak ESG. I really I beg to differ. Cost reduction may not happen. If you are complying with a supplier who is to follow all those processes and all that, you have to buy from certain raw materials which he has to be taken care of. His suppliers has to be taken care of. Your buying cost is going to increase because then you are limiting your vendors to some particular areas. Why I am telling you this? Unless it is mandated that you have to do an ESG procurement, and I am from an EPC organization. If I am supplying to Europe or to US, and there are projects where I have to do ESG compliance, then I have to have limited vendors. Then my cost will go up. I just can't have an internal requirement of net zero 2050, 2070, and then as a purchase head, I'm going to buy from those vendors. Because he's going to give me a quality product without going into all this. Maybe environmental friendly, maybe other issues, social issues are getting affected. But I'm getting a quality product which will sustain and will deliver for the product, for the project, which is for which I am going to buy. So I feel unless it is mandated from the end customers or government, in India, I don't think any off-taker will mandate it because it's a tender-based requirement. Who is the lowest has to get it. So as a company, if I come up, no, I am from Reliance, I am from this, I am going to do ESG and all that. If I am a purchase head, I am going to be always sitting and facing audit committees and finance team. That's why I have selected this.
Right.
So that is what I feel. It has to be mandated from external. Then only I can be competitive and be what supplying that from those suppliers.
Right. Now, I think, and that's the reason I emphasize this point that, okay, when we do the supplier selection, probably this point has to become as a first priority that, okay, who are ESG compliant? Can you just bring them up and do that? Now, when you look at the, as Ruchir also mentioned that, okay, when we need to bring a change, we need to use the tools in the organization. Probably we need to see that leadership should have a buy-in in that. And when we decided that, okay, we need to go this way, we will go this way only. Unless and it will not happen. That's the first point. Second point is, when we look at the cost reduction standpoint, I'm talking about product cost, when we manufacturing cost. Maybe the selling cost, maybe little higher side, but the manufacturing cost in terms of the process, what we are using, definitely it is going down. That's the... Okay.
Belong from a specific industry, and right now you are in dilemma to maintain the cost. But I have a solid example how to reduce the cost. Suppose there is a maturity of industries where, like in a quality is a cost or quality is a saving. Similarly, sustainability, if you perform and in a deeply, I have example. We have buying around 500 trucks in the 75 capacity, ton capacity, biggest order in the world. Do you know my cost is? Earlier I pay 65 kilometer per truck cost. Now I am only paying the 18 rupees per ton, and I get it. Even the payback is the 3 year, not even the 10 year. I mean, it's not a one example. Thousands of examples is there. So if you maturely analyze with the deeper long term, it's not a short term. Whenever you do it as a long term exercise, definitely ESG compliances, ESG environment adaptation. Like in Ambalika said, it's not a third tier, the scope 3 is only 35% to 30%. Scope 1 and scope 2, which is only the 60 or 65%, where you reduce direct cost. And definitely if you reduce cost, your product is competitive, product is a qualitative, and you can achieve whatever significant cost is. Because international body doing it. And now it is because it's a problem for us because we have a very learner stage.
Right.
That's my answer.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and I'm so sorry time is up. And one thing I should mention, Mr. Prasad has contagious smile on his face since the beginning, since the start. Let's have a huge round of applause for Mr. Prasad. And I would request Mr. Gaurav Pandit, General Manager, Supply Chain Management from Thermo Fisher Scientific India Private Limited, to kindly join us on the stage for felicitation. Let's have a huge round of applause for Mr. Prasad Yadav for executing